supposed to be Nina. Here we're still in El Nina.
Yeah.
Which means it's colder, wetter. But we've been in it for the last 3 years, and it hasn't really been that.
No, we got snow the first year I moved in here. Haven't had any since then.
Yeah.
I'm ready, I have a snow shovel now.
So was your first year the big one? Yeah. How does that all the time?
How about you?
My son got a job today.
What's he gonna do?
He's gonna do stocking for Dollar General, a couple days a week.
There you go. Close by?
Well, the one here in town.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it'll be
It's 8
close
kids in
by.
a mile.
Yeah. So you gonna walk or drive him? Probably drive him.
He can walk if I don't drive him.
Yeah.
So he does find this.
At first, they'll have somebody there, a job trainer to help him learn his job. He's done something similar to that.
Noticed a couple of one north Fifth and another one on Harvey Road there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he wanted a job in town, so he didn't have to travel too.
What is happening in town? I have
I told him I was right over
It's the
that.
airport commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our daughter, we moved to Crestwell. She was working at EG. We wound up having to give her lots of rides with Jean when we first lived in Crestwell.
Right.
Then she moved away, came back, and then her car broke, and now I give her rides. Not enough, but she's her.
Right now, it's only gonna be like Friday and Saturday, so. That's okay, he doesn't need extra. He starts working at 6 in the morning.
How are you? This is, are you on the airport commission too?
Well, thanks.
You're with the airport? Airport user. Hello. I use the airport humble.
So you gotta go to that, get together Thursday
I'm
night.
Dave, and you are?
On the airport commission.
What?
Get
Second
together
meeting.
Thursday night.
What's your name?
Kyle Bush.
Tram and
Oh,
do
yeah, I
rock.
appointed you both. Thank you.
You are.
Had to take him to get his hair. Actually, I describe him as Shaggy.
Shaggy.
I liked his hair when it was long, we wouldn't take care of it. His hair used to be down to here.
One of the nights.
Oh, hello, Tyler, okay. Thanks for coming.
I only grew my hair out one time, and for whatever reason, it just bothered everybody that I did it.
Now you'd do it again if you could.
Well, I couldn't,
Glad you came.
just because I wanted to see if people would have a problem with it, and they did.
Well, you just,
Another time?
whatever you do.
I was a rebel then.
Well, I
Not
was
so
too.
much now.
Well,
Oh, it's about time. Hello, Mr. Campbell.
How are you,
sir?
Mr. Mayor? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
hello, Mayor.
Norma and Shelley.
So you know Richard Dawson out there in the audience there, and just the ladies.
I'm meeting all the folks back there,
That's,
yeah.
I always like that you do that.
Since I wasn't at the meeting, I assume that Michelle will have to give the Park and Tree report.
I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't have a quorum,
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there you go. That's easy.
so there was no meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's easy.
It's okay. You weren't the only one that was gone. Chris is ready.
We are ready.
Ready.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
And they didn't really.
What's the date today? Oh, October 24, right? Good evening. Welcome to the Crestwell City Council work session, October 24, 2022. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming tonight. First item is Councilor Inman is not able to join us tonight. She came up sick this afternoon, so she is absent this evening. So then we go to the mayor's report, and I have a couple of things. I usually try not to bring things in the mayor's report, but two things came up on short notice, were not able to be included in the regular agenda. Well, only one. One of them is the LCOG report, that's a different item. So one thing came up, and it was particularly from the Oregon Mayors Association, came up too late to be included, so I made copies for you all. And Michelle, did you get a copy yet?
I got one in the email to me.
Okay, there you- Grace, you have a copy up there? For you. All right.
I have one. This is for Michelle.
Oh,
Michelle can have that one.
oh, I know. Misty's missing one. So, I guess I'll leave that one with you for Misty. So this came from the Oregon Mayors Association. You might have heard that the Oregon Mayors Association formed a task force on homelessness. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to just highlight some of the things. And what they're asking for is support from cities across the state. So, the Oregon Mayors Association Homelessness Task Force is wanting to bring, this is in the second paragraph, during the 2023 legislative session, they want to propose two separate budget proposals to the legislature. The first one is a budget package providing direct allocation to cities for homelessness response and prevention services, and number two, a budget package that provides capital improvement funding for cities. So in the direct allocation, the first big box there, their proposal is an amount equal to $40 per resident based on official population estimates from Portland State University. The proposal requires in no instance will an incorporated city receive less than $50,000 in direct funding, and the proposal would allow cities to use the funds for their own homelessness response and prevention services, or to redirect their funds to community partners, who are then required to use the funds for homelessness response and prevention services. On the back side, you see down the listing of cities. So, in our region, Creswell would receive $227,360 in a direct allocation to be used for homelessness response. The second item is, and the total amount that would be requested from the legislature for 241 cities in Oregon would be $123,575,800. That's the first part of the budget proposal. The second part is a capital allowance. And this would require meaningful allocation from the state for coordinated capital construction investments for specific shelter, transitional housing projects statewide. It's expected that a final dollar amount for needed capital construction investments would equal between $125 and $175 million. So, here's what the OMA is asking. A request for support. The OMA Homelessness Task Force and the OMA Board of Directors seek the support of Oregon's 241 cities for the above described proposal. In an effort to present the legislature, next page, and Oregon's next governor with a truly coordinated and collaborative proposal, the OMA hopes to submit its legislative request with as many city partners as possible. To explain the statewide nature of this crisis, then the LOC will secure the services of a communication specialist to work directly with cities interested in supporting the proposal. The communication specialist will work directly with interested cities to develop a one-page document that outlines the city's unique experiences with homelessness and how the funding proposed by the OMA would help the city respond to or prevent homelessness in their community. And the work performed by the consultant would be paid for by the LOC. So the next to last paragraph, if your city is interested in supporting the proposal, please contact any of the LOC staff, persons listed below, as soon as possible. Ideally, cities wishing to provide support should make contact no later than November 4th. So, questions, comments? It's coming up before the next city council meeting, which is why we had to hear it tonight.
I like the fact that there's an option to help prevent homelessness. I like that wording.
Yeah, I like that too.
We don't have a widespread issue here in our town, thank God. And I like that the food bank, support of the food bank can be, monies can be used for that. That's my input.
Okay, thank you.
I like the idea that we have something that we can use to work on the problem. I think one of the problems is the lack of affordable housing. If we could come up with a proposal to make it housing affordable for people, that would keep some of the people from becoming homeless that are in our area right now.
And that is one of the, you can see at the top, I didn't go over all the bullet points at the top of the second page that talk about ways the funds could be used, which includes affordable housing. Other thoughts, questions? Shelley?
As you say, I'm very supportive of it in spirit, and I'm interested in knowing where the money to support this would be coming from.
And there's no answer to give in here. Right.
That was my, sorry, that was my first thought, is exactly where are those funds coming from? And it seemed like there's a lot, there should be, I'd like to read this whole document thoroughly, and there's got to be more information to this. And then my other thought would be, so who would be in charge if you directed some of these funds to one of these bullet points, who's going to do it?
So Michelle and I are going to chime in the best we can. I would assume that if this passed, well, first of all, we would, if we elect to as a city council, we would say, yes, we give our support to this proposal, to the LOC. Then it goes to the legislature. So then, if the legislature adopts it, and if they allocate this money, those are all ifs, right? Then I would think that the money would come directly to the city, and it would be allocated for specific uses. We couldn't use it for whatever we wanted. It would be allocated for specific uses that then the council would probably have to accept whatever uses. I would imagine Michelle would work with staff to come up with a proposal for how to use those funds.
I would, actually, today I was at a LOC meeting on homelessness. That was in Cottage Grove. And I think we need to do a lot more public input on how we address the issue and how monies might be spent. So I would say that the funding should be set aside and we should have a town hall or something on how the citizens would like to see the money spent rather than staff.
Okay. This, if everything happened as outlined, the city would receive $227,000 in year one, which is a lot of money for our community.
It's a start. I mean, when you start talking about how the Boise case and the Grants Pass case affect us, and we will probably have a presentation for the city council next year by our city attorney on that. It's not much money. We have to be able to provide a warm, safe place for people who are interested in camping in our community. We can't turn them away and we can't send them on. We have to assure that we have a place for them here. And $227,000 is not going to go very far towards a homeless shelter. So we'll have some work that needs to be done.
Is this, I didn't pick up from this that they're asking, it appears that they're asking the legislature to do this as a one-time financial assistance to cities.
They talked about it today, and they said that they would ask the legislature to make it an ongoing program, but that the legislature, of course, only can set aside monies 2 years at a time. So the sustainability of the program is under question.
Okay. Okay, so other questions, comments?
Well, I've always heard from our own LCSO is that we don't really have a big problem here because we don't have a lot of resources.
Right.
So if we now plan on having, it sounds like a lot, but, you know, 227,000. If we do have those resources now, would that perhaps even make that our homeless problem bigger?
I can't address that. I don't know. It would depend on what solutions you would come up with to expend that money. But I do know that we have people who do car camp at our park. And we may look at assisting those folks. You may, it depends on what the community expresses and what city council decides.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the abatement cleanup, food bank assistance, those are things that could make the 227,000 go much further.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kevin?
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I always ask every regular council meeting what our transient and homeless population status is, and we usually get a report back, and like Councilor Castilla has pointed out, we usually don't hear anything that is too terribly, maybe one or two kind of one-off kind of cases or something like that, for which I think most of the time they're encouraged to go somewhere else. And I've always been kind of concerned about that because even though I know that our attorney has told us that from what I understand, that our ordinances and such are fairly straightforward and protective, and they don't deny anybody anything else than anybody else. Nobody gets special treatment and such. But it seems to me like we need to have our attorney's input again on this thing so that we have some good direction on this, and with the information. And then also maybe in the solution part of it, we consider some, this is probably putting the cart before the horse as far as talking about where the money goes, but I like the idea of, I don't think that we have the resources to, even with the money, to do what like Cottage Grove is starting to do right now with like a low barrier kind of shelter or something like that. But what we can do is we can contribute and be part of their program, and possibly.
One of the rulings that came down from the Grants Pass is that we have to provide it within our city limits.
Oh, really? See, that's where the attorney,
That's
but
new.
which is good, that's
And
new
that's
information.
new, and we'll have to start thinking about that. So, they talk a lot about, we talked a lot about working with collaborating agencies today, and the truth is we don't have collaborating agencies in Cresswell. We don't have.
In the county, no?
Well, we have the county, but we don't have them in Cresswell. They don't have an office here. They don't have people here. So working with collaborating agencies is something that we're going to have to start thinking about, and how to get assistance here in Cresswell for these people. It's been easier to just say, we have community sharing down in Cottage Grove, give them a bus pass to go to Cottage Grove, and they can get the services that they need down there. But that's not okay, and we are open to
Liabilities.
liability. Yeah.
So I think it is more than appropriate that we try to get some money coming in then.
It was something that was talked about today at the meeting, as that this is just something to help. And there's a lot of small cities our size and smaller, that have a real problem because we don't have the hospital, we don't have the groups that Cottage Grove has, we don't have a Rotary, for example. We don't have churches that are leading the discussion. We don't have community groups that are doing that. So, but we're not alone. That's important. There were plenty of small cities there today that were in the same boat that we're in, where we just have maybe a camper that shows up in our parks. People are going to have to understand that if there's a camper in the park, they get to be there. And that's not going to be something that certain parts of this community are going to be okay with. And we have to start thinking about that and how we're going to enforce our codes and how we're going to enforce our ordinances. And it's going to be a real change.
When is the deadline for these changes that are going to be going into effect?
They're already in effect, and the state actually has given us a deadline of July of next year, 2023. So we've got 7 months to look at our ordinances and make sure that they are not discriminatory according to these new rulings that came down.
So on this item, Shelley?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm wondering if it would benefit us to, as we look forward to, we're going to have some transition within our city council coming up, maybe a work session in January or February.
We'll bring in the city attorney in next year and discuss this.
Perfect. Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, just so we can learn about, what is the case law that we need to know about, what are the rulings that we need to know about, what are the proposals, what is happening here, and what else is happening with our state legislature in terms of, is it likely to be funded or not, just given some upcoming elections and transitions for our state.
Okay. Yep, we've had the conversation already about getting this scheduled early in the new year. So what we're being asked is to provide support to the proposal. Now, because this is not a regular council meeting, can we do that as the council?
Well, you can let staff know where you stand on this proposal, and I can let LOC know that they were asking people today, staff members today, to speak for their councils. I couldn't speak for you because we hadn't had this discussion, so I don't know where you stand on this, but I think you can give me direction and I can let LOC know where we stand and whether or not we want to be involved.
So I would ask the council, if the council is in consent, that we would want to give direction to Manager Amber to indicate to the LOC that we would be supportive of this proposal. Okay, looks like you have that.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to committee reports. The first report comes from the Administration and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just real quick, the November 2nd is the deadline to hand in the evaluation for Manager Amber, for it to be included in the November 14th packet for our executive session, where we'll conduct the evaluation.
Evaluation of what?
City manager,
I didn't get anything, okay.
you should have received an email.
I
With the-
might have missed it.
Didn't we get the packet? The packet was given to us at the last
That's right.
council
yes.
meeting, and you
Which I
were,
wasn't here.
Okay,
so Grace probably has that. Okay, so can you
Okay.
connect with Grace?
I can do that.
Okay. go ahead and finish your report.
And that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, public safety, now that's Misty, am I correct?
I didn't speak.
Okay,
We met on October 4th, and we continued with our last chore that we have, which is to review the emergency operations plan. Manager Amberg made all the changes that the committee had recommended in our September meeting, and we will be ready to present on November 28th as planned.
very good. Transportation and Public Works Committee.
No report today?
Okay, Parks and Tree Advisory Board. Manager Amber, was there a meeting?
There's no report. There was a lack of quorum.
Okay. Airport Commission.
Now it's back to me. Yes, the big news is the airport is open and functioning, and there will be possibly a 1 or 2 day closure coming up to install some other equipment that they're waiting on.
Okay,
And just some quick updates that Shelley is still working on more core grants. And also some big news is we received a STEM update from Mike Anderson, the school district representative, that we now have a teacher he will start teaching airplane maintenance, and that's gonna be in November. So that's big news. So, and then the rest, the lion's share of the meeting was centered around our 2 discussion items, which you see down below, are the airport rules and the airport 5-year strategic plan. So we'll hold off on that until, and perhaps maybe you'll hear from some commissioners.
all right, very good. Okay, LCOG. That's me. So, I have another email that just came in today from LCOG. And it's a news item, but it's also a need they have. Let me have one of those back. There you go. That one goes over to Tammy. This goes to.
Thank you.
So, Brenda Wilson, Director of LCOG, sent up an email today, which says they need volunteers, and it's for portioning meals, packing meals, delivering meals. If you could announce this at one of your public meetings, that would be really helpful. So Michelle, can we put this out on our, your email that you send out every week?
Sure.
Okay, so on the back side, it says, here's what they need in Creswell, 9 volunteers to assist in these different ways. So I wanted to get this to you so that you could get the news out yourself to whatever, whether it's on Facebook or a social group you're a part of, or groups of people that you're connected with. And the way to respond, it says here is interested, respond to Melissa Andrion, and there's an email and a phone number here. But they're needing, well, as you can see, the need is great throughout Lane County. And I know I have a family member who is in his 70s who receives weekly meals. But they have to have people to do all these things. So that's my report. LCOG next meeting is coming up, but don't have anything from the last meeting. I think I reported that last time around. Okay, so we move on to presentations. We have none tonight, and we go on to number 4.
Mayor Stram,
Yes.
Lane Act.
Did I skip Shelley?
Oh my gosh.
How did I do that? Shelley, would you like to give your report?
Heck yeah.
Okay,
Very
thank you.
excited. All right, well, so I'm just gonna say we've had a couple of things happening in our community. I'm just gonna point to the railroad tracks as right here. So in our last Lane Act meeting, I certainly shared with ODOT and with the whole group that just how grateful we were as a city that we have, that this is so much better. As I shared with them all, it drives like a dream, and in a world where we get divided by so many things, the piece that brings us all together is the jog, right, and making that better. And so I invited them all to come to Creswell and take a drive. over the railroad tracks. Still work to be done, but my goodness, we're not, breaking axles and all sorts of stuff as people drive over the railroad tracks. So, I mean, I get to drive over it a couple of times a day, and I just feel so great whenever I drive over it. So that has been happening. If you see Maddie, our former planner, I mean, just see her around. Please give her lots of high fives for the work that she did. Same thing with Curtis Thomas for the work that he's done as well to help champion that. So it's just magical. It's what we always hope for in our community is for things to work well. And then we had our Lane Act meeting. So we meet the second Wednesday of every month. So we'll meet second Wednesday of November. In case you're interested in attending, it happens online. You're very welcome to come. And so our last Lane Act meeting, we talked a little bit about. We just got some updates in terms of what's happening. Lane Act was asked for letters of support and endorsements for various projects that are happening. So there was a project in Eugene, project in Florence that Lane Act said, yes, we would like to sign off on that and help support those projects. And then we also took nominations for the next year, so the incoming chair and vice chair of Lane Act. And so I made sure to get myself on that committee so that I could help represent Crestwell and make sure that rural communities are represented within the leadership of Lane Act. So we are looking forward to meeting here soon to kind of get that ball rolling. So if you have names of individuals that you think would be great to serve in leadership for Lane Act, I would happily pass those along. I know that they look for a diversity of perspectives, so probably somebody from a larger city, somebody from rural, right? So all sorts of different ways that we can have a variety of perspectives on Lane Act. So anyway, so that is coming up, and like I said, I'm going to serve on that committee. And then we also heard a little bit from ODOT about some anticipated monies that are coming in and also some anticipated shortfalls. And I don't have a lot of details on what that means, and it's not anything that's happening like tomorrow or even next year, but as they project out some monies coming in for the next 5 to 7 years. There may be some interesting and upcoming conversations that we have. And so when I have more details, I will happily share that with you. And then finally, in our meeting as ODOT was talking, they talked about an upcoming grant program that is coming up, and Crestwell in particular was given a shout out for, and they said, this would be great for communities like Crestwell. And so I was like, I'm hearing, I'm listening, taking notes. And so there is an upcoming program called the Great Streets Program, or the Great Streets Grant Program. And so I thought, as we think about our work with roads, as we think about just improving our city streets and our main streets, that this might be a really good opportunity for us to seize upon some grant dollars. So I've shared that information, and hopefully we have more great streets here in Crestwell. And that's it for Lane.
Question for you.
Sure.
It's the second week of the month. What time of the day is the meeting?
It's at 5:30, and we meet over Zoom.
Oh, still meeting in Zoom? Mm-hmm. Well, that's nice.
Yeah. So.
I'd be interested in learning more about how to
Sure.
piggyback on and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will share the link for you to be there. Mhm.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot you.
It's okay. I get really excited about to talk about infrastructure, so.
Thanks to Tammy over there that caught me. Yes, Kevin.
Hi, Tasha, a quick question. Earlier in the summer, I think that you had shared with the council about the various priorities and such, and that maybe Crestwell's jog might be bubbling to the top or something like that. But then now you just mentioned that there was some other projects that they were interested in. Are those bumping this one at all?
No. So these are other projects.
Other projects,
Yeah,
okay.
that we weren't talking about. These are projects that their city is putting in some money in towards. So it's
Okay.
I will give you I got the agenda here pulled up. So let me give you the exact ones that we were supporting. And our support was really just, yes, we will sign off on a letter of support that says we should do these things. So one was around the City of Eugene's grant application for a pedestrian and bicycle bridge connecting River Road and Santa Clara communities. And then one was on the City of Eugene's grant application for a core grant as well. So, and then the one in Florence was, sorry, gotta go, and I believe it was, so a core grant endorsement for Florence Municipal Airport pavement rehab project. So wasn't one that was kind of in competition with some monies that we were gonna go after as well.
Gotcha, okay.
As I say, and there was I made a note to myself to make sure to ask on a status update for where we were in terms of prioritizing those projects, because like I said, we still have more work to do. I mean, as I think about the jog, it is so much nicer to drive over, and also it's weird to drive over in terms of road alignment and signaling and all that sort of stuff. And
Well,
so
you
I
can
think-
imagine just how much better it'll be when they do new signals and stuff like that. And so when you give them, a little bit, now we just want more,
I
so.
know. So, yeah, I agree. I was like, this would, I mean, again, as I think about things that are transformational for our community, that is an intersection that I think about that could be transformational for our community if it, yeah.
Cool, nice.
Thank you.
So I'm continuing to champion it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to 4, because there's no 3. And we begin with the review of the parade permit ordinance, and turn that over to Michelle. And is Lori Cooper with us tonight?
Yeah, Lori should be with us.
I'm trying, you guys,
There
can
you
you hear
are.
me? I can't hear you guys, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can
Hear you.
hear you.
We're being
Okay.
quiet.
Okay. You waiting for me to talk?
Well, we have the revised municipal code that was prepared by Lori, and she's here to answer any questions you might have about it. I think she did a good job of listening to your input and making the changes, so.
Council members, questions about the parade permit?
I don't have any questions. Good job, Lori and Michelle.
Yeah.
It lined up perfectly with my notes from our meeting, so
Yeah.
I thought you did good. I was anxious to see about the spontaneous gatherings, and I think you did a very good job of wording that. Any citizen, I think, can understand that. It's not attorney talk. Good job, Lori.
Yeah, thanks. I like to hear that.
Other councilors?
I think it's great. I think it's great. I like it, everything about it.
Kevin?
It was actually very well done, and I only had one concern that I thought I would mention. So this would be, I think, in the parade permit section of 10.30-020. And there's lettered items, and it takes letter F. The city recorder shall notify the applicant of the city manager's decision within 5 days after the city manager's review of the application. And the only concern I have is so we're talking about 2 different staff members having to connect on something. Do we have a delegate in case, like a provision for a delegate in the case where, say, the city recorder is out on vacation and can't complete that task within 5 days? So that was my only, I just looked for anything that could possibly go wrong, and that was just the one thing that kind of stood out as a possible.
You want me to speak to that, Michelle?
Sure.
Yeah, I think we don't really have to explicitly spell it out, but if that would happen, I would assume, if the city recorder was on vacation or out sick or something like that, I would assume that there is somebody who fills in for the city recorder. I don't know if you have a deputy city recorder, or maybe it's the city manager. But I think that goes without saying, it's how city business is run. So we don't really need to say designee unless you really want to be super specific, and we can do that. But I don't think legally it's necessary, but if it would help the city interpret the code, if the time came, then we could certainly do that.
It would be the city manager that would be responsible for letting them know.
Okay.
We don't
So I
have a
think-
deputy city recorder.
If it doesn't need to be
Okay. Then I think it's-
explicit, then I don't see a need to change it. If someone were to get nitpicky, that would be the only thing, so.
Okay, so Lori, I have a few things. The first one was, but I want to begin by saying I thought you did a really nice job reflecting the city council and the many requests that we had. So I thought you did a very nice job reflecting that. Under the same thing that Kevin just read, F, I think city manager needs to be made possessive with managers. So this should read, the city recorder shall notify the applicant of the city manager's decision.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Then this is a really small item. On the next page, item B, it's a 10.30.50 under B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth sentence down has city manager. And the sixth sentence, there's a space in between there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you see that, okay. So then my question had to do with, my other question really had to do with this section under spontaneous events. And I actually was confused on B. Because the first, this is 1030-090, section A begins spontaneous parades or gatherings, and then it talks about spontaneous parades and gatherings. But then section C also begins spontaneous parades, and it talks about that. But section B, I'm assuming section B is all about spontaneous events. It never mentions a spontaneous event, but the confusing thing to me is it mentions any parade permit that does not require the closure of part or all of an arterial street as defined in the Creswell Transportation System Plan. So as long as that's clear to our staff, maybe it doesn't need to be clear to the applicant. But I would assume most applicants would first of all say, what's an arterial street? Second, I don't have the Creswell Transportation System Plan. So that would need to be explained, and mainly I want to make sure that section B is still referring to spontaneous events, which I'm assuming it is, even though it never mentions it specifically in this paragraph, this long sentence.
Right, yeah, I think because it's the less than 3 business days, usually you'd need longer than that, right? Like if you say up above in the sections about regular parades that aren't spontaneous, there's longer period that you need to get, you have to do it 15 days prior to the intended date of the parade. So I'm thinking what this is saying, and this is kind of, well, it's not kind of, it is cadged from some other city codes. I think it's just that if they want to use a street for a spontaneous event, they should probably focus on something that's not an arterial, not a busy street, not an arterial. And so I think that's kind of more for staff. If somebody comes in and says, hey, so there was some big news, we want to have a parade celebrating it, we want to have a parade tomorrow, I think staff can look at this section and say, well, you could do it on some side street or something, but not on a main street, which is an arterial street. So I think that's the intent. And without writing 3 more paragraphs on what exactly a arterial street is and why, and this does seem kind of out of place, Mayor, I will hand you that. It seems kind of strange to be talking about a parade permit when it's in the spontaneous events section, but I think it's if somebody wants to use the street to have a spontaneous event is really what this means.
So the last, I said this was all one sentence, I was incorrect, it's two sentences. The second sentence then talks about a completed application for a parade permit that will require the closure of part or all of an arterial street shall be submitted and reviewed not less than 15 days prior. Well, the 15 days is what we're requiring for a parade.
Right.
So I wondered why we had this sentence in here when we've already said if you're going to do a parade, it's 15 days. And if it's an arterial road, that's the main one. So it seems like it's redundant. So that's why as I read it, I couldn't figure out if this was really referring to spontaneous events or if it was referring to both. And if it was referring to both, why is the second sentence there? Why is it needed? So I was just
I think it's,
confused.
go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I think it's, I agree that it's redundant, but I think it's just to point out if somebody is looking at your code and saying we want to have a spontaneous event a day after tomorrow, that this just includes everything, that if you want to use an arterial street for that, you're going to have to do it 15, it's not going to be spontaneous. You're going to have to do it 15 days. So what it does is provide for, the constitutional standards about spontaneous events, but just letting people know in one place here that if they want to use Main Street, that's not going to be something spontaneous. It's going to have to be at least 15 days. So like I said, kind of unclear. I mean, it's not unclear to those of us who know, but without writing a book about it, I think the idea was try to be succinct here and put stuff where people will be looking for it. So yes, it does repeat. And what we could just say is, refer to, section such and such up above, instead of repeating that last sentence. But I also think it doesn't hurt to keep that sentence in there. There's no legal problem with keeping it there other than think it's confusing, or the public might think it's confusing, or staff might think it's confusing. We can try to make that clearer.
Well, I just had questions about it, and you have cleared up my questions. And as long as, Michelle, you think that this makes good sense to the staff, sometimes there's value in redundancy, then I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So on the very last page under F, I had a question where this is 10.30.100, departmental cost. Under F, it says the city manager shall have the discretion to waive departmental cost recovery under this section upon a satisfactory showing by the permit holder that the payment of such cost is likely to create an undue hardship upon the permit holder. Then the next sentence is what confused me. The city council shall provide application forms. I would think that the city would have application forms, not the city council. We don't give out application forms.
That's true.
We can approve them if it's so required, but we don't give them.
We don't ask you to do
Yeah.
administrative application forms, so that's a good catch. We should make that the city will provide the application forms.
I agree, that's good.
All right, so that's all I had. Any other council members with questions or input? Okay, so with those adjustments, council, the question is, are you ready to put this on the agenda for the November council meeting to vote on it? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so Lori, with those changes we talked about, if you could prepare it for us, the final, then we will put it on our agenda for the November, Grace, what's the date for that? 14? November 14 council meeting.
Okay,
And we'll
sounds
move that
good.
forward. Thank you. And thank you
Thank
for all
you.
your diligence in working with us. This has taken a number of months, but we're getting there, aren't we?
Yeah, it's like making sausage, and you complied with the settlement agreement with Ms. Bivens, so and you made your code better. Your code was a bit outdated, so I think it was, took a while, but it wasn't too painful, and now it's done. So, or once you adopt it, it will be done. And of course, there'll probably be public comment and such. So we'll see if people have any input on that, but I'll get it to Michelle and have it ready for your November 14th meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Talk to you later.
Thank you very much, Lori.
Bye-bye.
All right, we move to item B, airport rules and regulations. Shelley Humble. Where's Shelley?
Shelley's virtual. She's at a conference
Okay,
tonight, so she's visiting with us virtually.
very good.
I'm right here.
Oh, you are there. We look at the puppy dog.
That's her?
Oh, there you are. Okay. Hello, Shelley.
Hello, how are you guys?
Good.
We're good.
We're very good. Okay, so Shelley, we're going to have Shelley proceed?
Yep.
All right, Shelley, it's all yours.
So before you are you asked that the airport commission review the questions and concerns that you had around the complaint process, and also to have the attorney look at the complaint process and the rules and regulations. So before you is the updated version being reviewed by the attorney, and then the airport commissioners, and then the attorney again. And I believe there are airport commissioners in the audience as well who can answer any questions that you may have, or I'm available for questions.
Okay. So, council members, what do you have? Well, let's just go through it from the beginning. How's that? Okay. Any questions, comments on page 5? 6, 7, 8. Page 8 is where we have Ross's first comment, pilot in command. So Ross's comment is that there's no need to define that term. So should this just be struck from the definitions page, or Shelley, do you think that it needs to be left in there?
I believe in speaking with the airport commissioners, they felt that it could be removed without being a detriment to the airport rules and regulations.
Okay, so council, recommendation from Shelley is that that be removed as per Ross's recommendation. Good with that? Okay, so we remove that. Okay, anything else on page 8, council members? Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. So, first thing I want to mention, Shelley, under 5.03D is the second sentence, the word wishes is spelled with an H. That needs to be changed.
I'll get that corrected, thank you.
Okay? Other comments on this page, council? We're going to have the council run through this, and then we'll field questions, input from the members of the audience, all right? Page 14. Councilors. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. Page 18. Now, most of these next pages, there's not any input from Ross or anyone else. So unless you step in, council, we're just going to keep moving along. And that takes us to, that's the end of the document as far as I have. There were no other comments by Ross. Anything else? Council, did you pick up anything in the rest of this document? Shelley?
I was gonna say, I didn't pick up anything, like, anything that needed to change, but I did notice and really appreciate on page 27, under 11.03, the waivers and modifications, the striking of the city manager or his designee, and I just really appreciated the inclusive language.
Good catch. Okay, so let's look at the complaint form, and what I want to point out on the first page is I think it would be valuable to include email address, unless there's a reason why we wouldn't. We have contact numbers, we have address, but it would seem that in this day and age we should have email address in here too. I'm looking for Shelley or Michelle if there's a reason why that would not be appropriate on that page.
I think it's a good thing to add as an email address.
And Mayor, that form has not been updated, and I did not update that form until you are okay with the procedure, because there is some verbiage that will have to mirror the procedure that's written in the rules and regulations, so that attachment will update.
Okay, so that was my main catch, that this complaint form, as you've seen, council, does not reflect the new process as in the rules. Because the
Correct.
process, just a summary, see if I got this right, it's good to read over. The process is a complaint goes to the city airport manager, then is conferred with the city manager for an appropriate response. Then if the complaint goes further than that, it goes to the airport commission for a written response. Then if the complaint goes further than that, it comes to the city manager for a response. If the complaint goes further than that, it comes to the city council for a written response, and the city council has the final decision. Is that an apt summary?
Yes.
That is correct.
So that's what will have to be reflected in the new form. The other thing I want to call out is throughout here, it's referred to the city administrator, so that just needs to be city manager.
That is correct. It will all be updated.
Okay. And then we have the attorney, Ross Williamson's comments. And then just a stream of emails. So, council members, any other comments on what you have before you tonight in terms of the airport rules, regulations, and the complaint form? Counselors? Okay, we have a member of the audience who raised his hand. If you'd like to, fellow in the blue shirt, did you want to speak first?
I do, but I think I have more to say, so maybe I'll let him go first.
Okay, so if you want to just, you can just speak right there, introduce yourself to us.
My name's Jeff Hendrickson, and I'm not a public speaker, I can tell you that.
Okay.
I want to go back 18 months, and this complaint process wasn't followed. And I want to tell you, about 18 months ago, I hope you guys all don't shoot me because I'm the guy that flies helicopters, but I like airplanes too, and I fly them. And it's been a big word around here, obviously. So the complaint process should be the guy that complained is supposed to do what? File a complaint to Shelley. Done. And also it says right in the rules and regs, you're supposed to get two people together and try to solve it. Didn't happen. Never heard about it. It went straight to rulemaking that fast. Rulemaking. And I got to tell you, that's not even what it says. It wasn't followed. And so I'm going to propose something that you guys need to put some fees behind it. You got fees for smoking, you got fees for all kinds of stuff. I'm telling you, there's so many things out there, and this would have never happened, number one, if she would have just done it right and said, hey, I didn't even know who it was for sure that complained until he admitted, Kyle admitted to me and said, hey, I'm the guy, I just didn't like you buying a hanger next to me. I said, man, I'm sorry. So if she would have just said, hey, look it, the helicopter isn't breaking any FAA rules, done, and shut it down, it'd have been done, we'd all got along. I think the management process has a problem. And then, okay, that's an example of how we're not following the complaint process. The complaint process again. I started going to the meetings at the airport. And I complained just after the snow at the next meeting that we had somebody sliding by the apron, and I can read you in the rules and regs right here at the airplane that they should, in the airport, that they should be removed if it's careless, reckless operation, the FAA, blah, blah, blah. I can read all this to you. No reason to. I said, I want to know who it was, and I want to know how it's taken care of, because it needs to be documented. 2 sessions later, I finally said, hey, what's going on? Why can't I get an answer? Well, Kyle had just been elected the new airport commission, on the airport commission. And he said, hey, it was me. But nothing was ever documented. It was documented he took on and off the runway, okay, no big deal. But nothing said that he was reckless across the apron, side sliding his airplane. And that is reckless endangerment, it says right here. So are we enforcing the rules? I don't think we are. So then you start turning over stones, and I drove through there with the fire department and said, hey, what about this hangar was open, that hangar was open? I said, what do you see in there? What do you see in there? Well, I don't know, is the manager taking care of it? And I'm gonna stop right there because you know what? I don't know what to do. Because I complained, wasn't taken care of. Somebody else complained, it was. And I'll tell you, another rule that we need to figure out is how to vote in the people on the airport commission. Because I was there at the meetings when 2 other commissioners were voted on. One a city person for the city, whatever, and then another one from, I don't know, but when the opening came up for the users, nobody got an email. But the standard was we all got emails for everything else. So we need to have a specific rule that says for an opening in the seat on the airport commission, this is how it will happen. Because there were several people that wanted to be in there. You know how many applications they got? 1. You know how long it took for you guys to adopt them? A month. You know where it was at? A sheet of paper on a bank door. I'm saying there's a lot of problems, and you know what? If I can't get a complaint past her because she owns a business down there, so if I complain to her about her business, that's a conflict of interest. If I say, hey, guess what? You're changing oil out in front of your hangar, and it says right here in the rules and regs, what's she gonna do? Something has to happen. So guess what? I hate to tell you guys, but I think we all ought to sit down and we ought to solve it. But nobody sat down with me to solve it. I've been through 18 months of you know what. So, guess what? I've been in a little communication with the FAA, and I don't think if we can't get it done together and make a happy place out of it, they told me I was crazy for even stopping the rules because they could have taken care of it all themselves. All those rules that were trying to get pushed through by helicopters, and there's not even me on there. There's a helicopter kitty corner from me that's been there for 20 years. There was a great big Sikorsky there last week. Somebody had a pickup for me that really didn't like me for a while, and she ran with it. Instead of saying, no, that ain't gonna happen. There's already FAA rules. He's not doing a bad thing. And the big beef was that I was gonna damage something, rules and regs. Then I'm gonna tell you the last thing. I pulled up to get fuel. I hovered, I sat down, there was a beautiful aircraft sitting there. RV, his name's Cody, he's an RV-14. I got out and I said, Cody. I didn't know his name, I introduced myself, I said, am I okay? I don't want to disturb anything. He said, you see that bucket right there? He said, it didn't even move and it's empty. He said, you see my hat? Didn't even have a problem. So the downwash that we've all been upset, and I've been pounded on for 18 months, nobody looked into it first. Nobody took care of it. So this complaint process, I'm saying needs revised. We need to have fines. We need to figure it out. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Now,
Yep, my name is Bjorn Dahlin, and I'm a recovering corporate pilot.
can you spell your last name, Bjorn?
Dahlin, D-A-H-L-E-N.
Okay, thank you.
So I've been using the Creswell Airport since about 1996, so it's been a little bit, and I've seen a lot of the ups and downs that have gone on out there. I've kind of gotten more involved in the last couple of years because I've been working overseas a lot, and I've been back quite a bit during the pandemic, and I've shifted some of my business back here. So I've been around a lot more, and I echo some of Jeff's concerns about enforcement of the rules. And first and foremost, I'll say that there are a lot of violations at the airport. There's a lot of violations of the rules and regulations. And I won't get into all of them, but some of them by nature are transitory. You know, somebody, if they're skidding across the airport or whatever, that happens, and you know, it's not something you can duplicate unless somebody took pictures of it or something. But what I will say is first of all, I don't see much enforcement, period. And that creates a problem because then you end up with a situation where the enforcement is a complaints-driven process. and that's not really good either. Somebody needs to be going around and checking on stuff and making sure that the rules are enforced, because only then we have, a fair and uniform process. And I don't think we have that now at the airport. I'm confident of it, partly from Jeff's experience, but also other things that I've seen. So speaking directly to the complaints process section that's going to be revised, I'm not sure that that matters that much, because the way things are being done now, this convoluted process doesn't really make sense, because there's not a lot of enforcement to begin with, and if it's complaint driven, which this just reinforces, all that does is create more animosity instead of this, sort of friendly neighborhood airport that we'd all like to see operate here. It should be done that way, but the only way that can happen is if somebody has an issue, then they go to the airport manager, and then it's adjudicated fairly. Everybody sits down and talks about it, which is discussed here, but doesn't happen. Or it's fairly and transparently addressed. And having all these steps doesn't really match with it, because one thing that occurred to me is, so the airport rules and regulations are actually passed by ordinance. So I believe that makes them code. So does it have to be the airport manager, the city manager? I don't know where the airport commission fits, because probably most of them aren't actually code enforcement officers. To have this type of thing taken care of. I also agree that it would be good to have penalties, because there's nothing in here. And generally, it's always my understanding from the research that I've done on it, it's somebody was counseled about it, and that's fine, there's compliance, but when there's a pattern of non-compliance and then they say, yeah, I won't do it again, there's no penalty. And you have penalties for dog barking, for smoking, things like that. So I've been in aviation about 30 years. We have a lot of rules and regulations. These are not onerous at all, and most of them are built around safety. They're for safety. So it doesn't make sense to me that you have to have this long, convoluted process to address a safety issue. Anybody should be willing to take that up immediately if they have evidence that it's happening. It's about safety. And if it's not done locally, it will get done by the FAA, and that doesn't benefit anybody because it affects grant assurances and all kinds of other stuff. So, anyway, thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm looking for a response from Shelley or from Michelle to begin with. Shelley, were you able to hear everything that was said?
I was, Your Honor.
Okay.
What kind of response would you like? Would you like me to go into detail, or would you like to, I'm not sure what you would like.
Well, response as it relates to what is before us, the rules and regulations and the complaint process.
I believe that Ross was spot on when he asked that we have timelines for the complainant as well as staff. In the previous rules and regulations, people were able to make a complaint without it being written. And at that time, it was at the airport manager's investigative control to handle the complaint, which is how they were handled, any verbal complaints. The written complaints were the formal, and in the world that we live in today, it is very good policy to have everything written, so it's traceability. I learned that when I was code for the city, and so that takes out the ambiguity of whether or not a complaint was given or whether or not it was completed. It gets out of that, all that hearsay. It's all documented, so there's a firm timeline of all the complaints that happen, and we have very few complaints at the airport.
Okay. Manager Amber.
Well, this process that we're undertaking tonight to rewrite the rules and regulations and update the complaint process, I think, is important for obvious reasons. I think there has been some dissatisfaction with the way that things have been handled at the airport, and we'd like to see that dissatisfaction addressed. And the best way to do that is to have things in writing. And so I think that the city council is taking the proper task at hand and making it so that a complaint that gets filed has a clear and addressable process that can be followed, and that it is in writing. I have heard things about the airport, and I have addressed them with the airport manager. She always is very responsive to me, and always has assured me that she has followed up on issues, but these things have not been documented. So I think that it is important that we have a new era of documentation for these issues at the airport.
Okay, thank you. Council members, your thoughts, comments? Tammy?
So prior to these rules, there was no complaint form.
There was a complaint form.
Okay.
Probably the one that was before us.
Okay. And so I'm just, when you said they weren't documented, do you mean like the process of responding to the complainant wasn't documented, or what?
I think that we're going to clarify, I think there were some gaps in how things got documented or how things were addressed.
Okay.
A lot of it was done during email, which is not an official documentation.
Okay.
Other things were done on notepads. There were photographs. It would be nice to have a packet of documentation that we can go to a person who is aggrieved or who is being reported, and we can sit down with the person and we can go through it. And I have not had that to where I felt comfortable actually going to a person and saying, hey, you know, you've been doing something that needs to be addressed. So this new process hopefully will make that much more clear.
Okay.
But there has been a process, and Shelley has been addressing, it's just been more informal.
Okay. And then my last question is there a process if the complainant, okay, say, you know, John Doe's dog is loose, running around, no leash, definitely not allowed, right? Definitely not allowed. And a person wants to go to the lounge, get one of these complaint forms, fill it out, but they want to remain anonymous. Is that an option?
No.
It's not an option with the complaint process per se in Crestwell.
No.
If anyone files a complaint because the dog is running around in the neighborhood barking and scaring their children, you have to file a formal complaint, and it's not anonymous.
That is the way the code enforcement policy is also written. Anonymous is not acted upon.
That's just a little concerning to me, that, because what if you fear retribution or attack or, I don't know, something to be done to your hanger because you're getting someone else in trouble? I'm just throwing that out there for discussion. If a person absolutely doesn't want the one that they're complaining about, there's just no option. They have to give can they give their name on the complaint form, but say, I don't want the individual I'm complaining about to know that I'm complaining?
that would be a Grace question, but I believe public records, it has to be available.
She's agreeing. Okay, that was just my concern.
There's still the avenue for informal complaints that are verbal. And, go ahead, Shelley.
No, in the new rules, there is no verbal, because that's when the ambiguity happens.
So there's no process for an informal complaint.
There is a process
It's
for
informal, but it's
complaint,
written.
but it has to be
Excuse
written.
me, this is council discussion time.
It's informal, but it's in written. It's in written form. It's informal, but it's in written form. But we do allow it to be written in email or on the complaint form, or it could be just a piece of paper, but it has to be written. There has to be traceability.
Okay, that's under 5.03, so yeah, that's correct, that's what she's saying, okay. Okay, anything else? Other council members, thoughts, comments?
Well, I believe that we need this process. And I think that the commission and folks involved did a pretty good job of being thorough and having some sort of process. Now, following through with that, that is not a matter that is what we can do anything about as council people. So I feel value in this complaint process. There is value, and it's important, and it needs to be in here.
Shelley?
I was gonna say, I'm wondering if it would make sense for there to be an added, maybe like just a simple flow chart of if a complaint comes in, here's then the next step in the process, then here's the next step in the process. As I read this, and I've read over it several times, I feel like I have a good sense of, okay, so here's the next step in the process. But if I'm someone new, right, and maybe new to the city, maybe a new hangar user, user of the airport, there might be some questions, and so I wonder if that might help simplify. If I have a complaint, here's what I should expect the next step of that process to be. I don't know if that makes it murkier or not. Maybe I just really like flowcharts.
I don't know, Manager Amberg, is that something that you would include in a document like this, a flow chart?
A flow chart could help. That's a good suggestion.
And it would be like maybe an addendum in here?
Or it'd just be something that somebody could refer to. It could be an addendum, I suppose. It could be an official addendum if you want it to be.
Okay.
But it could also be something that is just an illustration that somebody could refer to on the proper way to have a complaint resolved.
You know, the complaint form that we have, knowing that it has to be updated, if this is what is given to me to fill out, it does go through the whole process. It doesn't have it diagrammed out, but it shows me that this page I fill out and submit, and then on the back, it actually, this is where you can put your little flow chart. Because right here on the back of this is the complaint process and appeals taken directly out of the code. And so this is where you can put that little flow chart. But then if this is what's given to me, then I can see, well, here's what the complaint process is. It's right on this piece of paper. And here's all the different steps it's going to go through. And I'm going to fill out and turn it in. But I do have it here. So I would think that could be added here if we wanted to. Other thoughts, comments, Shelley?
I'm gonna come back to the attachment, and I wanna look at it again. But I'm also wondering if there can be an addition of, if I have questions, here's exactly who I contact, or, here's the email address of the airport manager, or, so then that way, again, even if email is informal, it can still be a matter of public record, so that we can do our due diligence to make sure that we're we're delivering on what we promised, which is, I'm gonna follow up on this complaint.
Who's the we're? We're doing what we promised. Who's the we're you're talking about?
I mean, I think that falls to the city, because if they've got a complaint form, and I'm looking at it again, because I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Or I guess maybe it falls to the airport, that if the airport has, here's what we have said is our rules and regulations. So essentially this is our contract with you, and what our promise as to what it is that we're gonna do. And if I have questions about that, here's who I get in contact with.
Well, whenever anybody signs on at the airport for a hangar, they get some kind of contract. And it's spelled out who the who the airport manager is, I'm sure. They have all that information.
Okay.
Kevin, we're gonna jump to you, and then Norma, and then if you have any other comments, and then I have a few comments. Kevin?
Okay. So I'm just trying to maybe address a little bit of the disconnect that I hear between, we don't get a lot of complaints and there's lots of violations. That's what I'm hearing. And that the process is completely or almost completely complaint driven. And so I really feel strongly that the documentation is important, but also not just for being able to say this is what so-and-so said or did or whatever, but to also track the trends for the things that need to be done so that they aren't necessarily always complaint driven. Because now you can say, well, we've got this documentation here, 3 of them, as a matter of fact, that this thing is going on. Okay, now that shouldn't be complaint driven anymore. That should be something that's, looked at strongly, I think is what I'm trying to say. So I just feel that that's an important component, that we use this process and this documentation so that we take some of that complaint-driven stuff out of the equation. So that's my comment.
Okay. Oh, I'll make a few comments. Oh, Norma, you have any comments?
No, I don't have any comments.
First of all, I want to thank Jeff and Bjorn for coming and speaking tonight. Because public speaking alongside with snakes is most people's 2 greatest fears we have are snakes and public speaking, right? You've heard that. So I appreciate that. A couple of things I picked up on was, one of them was how commission members are set in place on the airport commission. So there is a process for that. And if you come down to City Hall and you talk to Grace, our new recorder, she can give that to you. But the city council appoints members of the commission, and when there's a vacancy, we advertise that. And we advertise that, I believe, in the Chronicle, correct? Where else do we advertise? Because we have lots of commissions and stuff like that for the city, and we're all the time needing people for various commissions around the city. How is it advertised publicly when we have a vacancy?
It's in the Chronicle, it's on the website, it's on the reader board. And
It's in my weekly update.
in your weekly update, yes. And it's also posted at the bank, and it's posted at the post office. And it is posted at City Hall.
Front door of City Hall. So that's how we normally post all vacancies. And then beyond that, I always say to the city council, we're looking for somebody for such and such a position. So city council, you gotta help me go out and recruit. So that's the normal process of recruiting, but we do have a process in place for how a person gets appointed. You can get that.
Yeah, I understand that. I asked about it, but always before the other 2 that I was around that I couldn't put my application in for, we got emails. We get emails for everything. And so it was emailed, but then every user that I talked to never got one email about this last one being open for the user. And you guys only got one because it wasn't emailed. So that's what I'm saying, the consistency. If it's not gonna be emailed, then don't email at any time. But if it's gonna be emailed, then do it every time. And that's what happened on the last one. Got one applicant, lots of people wanted to put their application in, and it was appointed before the next commission meeting.
So here's a recommendation that you could spread out there. So for a number of years now, our city manager, every Friday, puts out an email to anybody and everybody who wants to be on the email list. And it gives a summary of any meetings that were held that week, and it goes through all kinds of community stuff, but it always will include vacancies on any committee, commission, board. So anybody can get on the list, goes out every Friday. I would encourage you to circulate that to all the airport people and say, and all they need to do is send an email to City Manager Amber and say, please put me on the list for Friday. And that's the best way to get all the news that anybody can get.
I just assumed the email was part of it because we were getting emails.
Yeah, no, this is a whole different email.
We didn't know that, because it was consistent before that, but then this little one slid right through there and it was like, anyway, appreciate it. I'll
So,
do that.
yeah, spread the good word,
I will.
because Michelle puts that out every week. I want to address the complaint-driven process. So, unless it's changed, because I've only been mayor again for a year. I was mayor a long time ago. But it used to be that our system for code enforcement in Crestville was always complaint-driven. Because we simply don't have the staff to go around and check up on 5,000 people who live here and see if there's complaints. Has that changed?
We do have a code enforcement officer who does drive around now, but they're just code for the city, they're not the airport.
Right. So at the airport, it would be Manager
Or it would be
Humble.
Humble.
Manager Humble. So I can't actually speak to whether our complaint process at the airport is only complaint-driven or whether Manager Humble is actively looking. I can't speak to that.
It's complaint-driven at the airport.
Okay. And that's how it's been in the city for years. And I remember many years ago talking to someone about the city of Eugene. And they said, we do have full-time code enforcement people in Eugene, but it's still a complaint-driven process because you can't cover the whole city of Eugene with however many employees they have. And so it's complaint-driven. And I also remember having this conversation with that person, and at one time with Ross Williamson too, because people have come to me before and said, well, I have complaints, but I'm concerned my neighbor might retaliate. And the answer was, as much as we want people to make anonymous complaints, it can't be done that way. You have to sign your name on. And they don't necessarily release your name, but it has to be there for public record. So that's what I was told. I thought it was interesting that both of you brought up the idea of penalties and fees. And the way the city works that through, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, is we do have all kinds of ordinances for the city. And the most common one that comes into our municipal court is barking dogs and dog problems, am I right?
Yeah.
And we do have fees for all kinds of violations, whether it's moving violations, traffic violations in Crestwell, and all those things that happen within the city of Crestwell, other than crimes like murder and things like that. We don't deal with that. But traffic violations, barking dogs, neighbor disputes, all that kinds of stuff, we have rules and regulations. And if you get a citation, you come before the judge. And then the judge determines whether you need to pay a fee, and if so, it's based on our fee structure.
It's a fine.
It's a fine.
It's not a fee.
It's a fine. So if there were violations at the airport that were in violation of our regulations, then I suppose we could somehow create a process to where airport violators would also then come before the municipal judge. The judge would hear the case, make a determination, and assess or not assess a fine. But that's the only process I could think of. The city council is not set up to be the final decision maker for a complaint, and then the city council, we do not level fines.
Fines, yeah.
So we'd have to tweak the process
It would have to be put into our municipal code for our municipal judge to actually have fines associated with certain activities.
So-
And I'm
so-
not sure he's up to date on what airport violations are about.
Well, like living in a hangar, having an RV in a hangar, that's a violation. But nobody does anything about it. It could be there for a month in a hangar, and it's like, nobody's doing anything. It's like, that's a pretty bad violation. It's a FAA violation. So, that's like what I'm talking about, is somebody could drive by, hey, we got a fine for that, and it would straighten things out fast, is all I'm saying. How do we get right back to the rules? Everybody's safe, everybody's, anyway.
Well, you both brought up the ideas of fees and fines, and it put my brain on a whole different track to how does the city assess fines, and we only have that's the only,
Through the municipal
through the
code.
municipal code. So, counselors, Manager Amberg, Manager Humble, if we felt that that was a process that we should consider, then we certainly could take that up.
Well, there could be some sort of penalty that could be written into the rules. But I'm not sure about fines. I'm just not sure that that's a municipal court duty.
So what kind of penalties could be written in here that wouldn't be a fine?
Well, for somebody living in a motorhome on the airport, I would assume that they would have to be removed from the airport. I can't imagine allowing that. This is the first I'm hearing of it. And I imagine that some action should be taken to correct it.
You have a suggestion on how to proceed?
If I may, Mayor, I am not aware of anyone living in a motorhome on the airport. If it is happening, it's after I've left for the day and they're gone before I come back. I have never been notified. There's been no written complaint about an RV on the airport housing anyone. It's against the rules and regulations, and they are asked to leave. There is a specification in there that if someone comes in and would like to stay underneath their camp, underneath their wing of their airplane, while their airplane is getting maintenance, that is allowed, so long as, and I would assume that it would go for an RV, as long as they fill out a form and get permission to do that. But it's for a short period of time, but it is available to the users currently in the rules and regulations.
But Shelley, how would you enforce somebody actually living on the airport? What would you do? Would you have?
If I found out that they were living on the airport, I would require that they leave.
What if they refuse? Would you get the police involved?
I would call Lane County, yes, in the past, when we've had issues, I would call Lane County Sheriff's Office and they would forcibly remove them, make them leave.
Okay.
And it's been done before.
Okay.
But I have no knowledge whatsoever. I've never been given any information regarding someone living on the airport or in the hangar. And I can't deal with anything if I'm not aware of. I'm in my office working on grants and projects 99% of the time. Joel is there 0.6 FTE, and he is the boots on the ground. He is the one going around mowing the grass, fixing the things that break. We're 1.6 FTE for all of the airport.
Okay. Okay, so those are my observations. Any other counselors want to wrap back around?
Just a
Alonzo?
question, is that common? Is that a thing for municipal airports to have fines and penalties?
Is that a thing for municipal airports to have fines and penalties, Shelley, that you know of?
For more of the regional, not GA airports, usually they, I don't know that, and I can ask around, I'm at the Oregon Airport Managers Association conference right now, I could ask around at the smaller GA airports. I know that like Eugene, because it has commercial service, so any of the airports that have commercial service, they are a lot more strictly regulated by the FAA and the TSA. So they have a lot more binding rules and regulations than general aviation does. General aviation is operated under Part 91. So the rules and regulations are not as restrictive.
What are the penalties that you can assess against somebody if they refuse to comply after you investigate a complaint? What teeth do you have?
At this time, none.
So what would you recommend as having some ability to rectify that?
I mean, I don't know about, I guess we could look at code and see what fits, whether or not it's a fine or is it removal of the airport for a certain length of time. I'd have to look at grant assurances, and I would talk to the other airport managers for like airports to see what they do.
Okay.
Okay. Council members, any other thoughts or comments at this point?
I was just going to say, my question was going to be consistent with what Councilor Castillo asked as well, is fines, is there a process that we might be able to mirror if another city does that? And so that was going to be my question.
So maybe some further research.
Yeah, sounds like that, to look into the possibility of fees and fines.
Not fees.
Fine, fine.
Actually, you said penalties.
yeah.
Penalties. Penalties. I wrote down here. Penalties. Okay, further research on penalties. Okay, councilors, any other comments on the document itself? We know that the attachment, the complaint form needs to be updated.
Oh, I did have one more thing. Where it says city administrator on the complaint form and thereafter, I think that should be changed to
Yeah,
city
we
manager.
noted that. City manager needs to be consistent in that document. Okay. Otherwise, I think we're good on this, but it sounds to me like the council is saying we need to hold off on adopting this until we can do a little bit more research on the idea of penalties for violations.
Penalties, yes.
Council, are you in consensus on that?
Yeah.
Okay, we're sorry to have to throw it back to you again, Shelley. And Airport Commission, probably we'd like the Airport Commission to do another review once Manager Humble's got some ideas.
I think it would be a good idea for the Airport Commission to look into the penalties once she's done some research into it and make sure that they are consistent with what the airport should be doing.
Okay? So we're going to ask you to look into that and also update the attachment per what we have here, and then bring that to the Airport Commission for another look-see. And to Jeff and Bjorn, you know, Airport Commission meetings are always open to the public. Sounds like you've already been there.
Regular.
So, you know, continue to go, invite others to go and weigh in on it. Okay. Are we ready to move to the next item? Alonzo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is the adoption of the 5-year airport strategic plan. Manager Humble. Back to you.
I would ask that I turn this over to Airport Commission Chair Jim Glasso. He would like to speak to you regarding the strategic plan.
We would love to hear it. You want to come right up here?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I can't say that we are bringing you a strategic plan tonight, although I'd like to give you a progress report and ask for your assistance in a couple of areas. So, we're basically looking for a strategic plan for the upcoming 5 years. As you may be aware, the last strategic plan covered years 2018 through 22, and we're looking to cover 2023 to 28. So I thought I'd let you know, like, what, some of the major issues that are within the scope, kind of give you a bit of a progress report on where we are so far. Many of the things in the 2018 version plan have been completed. A couple of things remain in process for reasons I'll explain. Completed things, or as we noted, we've got a new runway now. We've got new taxiways on the south end of the airport. And this time next year, we'll have new taxiways on the north end of the airport. So that was in the plan. We have a GPS instrument approach, which if you're a pilot, that's a very important thing. But maybe not so much if you're not a pilot. Then there's been quite a bit in what I would call auxiliary equipment and facilities that have been upgraded. Things like the maintenance shed and different things that you just need to do at an airport because it's a capital intensive piece of infrastructure. And it needs to be upgraded and maintained on a consistent basis, and the city's been doing that. A couple of the things that we had in, one of the principles that we approached the last strategic plan with is that we need to include some things that will demonstrate value to the citizens of Eugene. Not that's the wrong town. Citizens of Creswell. I used to work for the city of Eugene, so I pardon that. So we need to demonstrate value to the citizens of Creswell. A couple of the initiatives that we had there, we made some good progress in. One, the STEM program, which was mentioned earlier, it was pretty stymied by COVID and then also prior to COVID, even the departure of our school superintendent, and at that time he had actually hired a teacher that was doing drone classes in the gymnasium, and she departed. Her family moved out of town, so we really got stuck there for a couple of years, and it's just now our Commissioner Anderson may speak to. We've really gotten some traction going with the school district, and we're really excited about what lies in our immediate future on the STEM program. The other area that we wanted to see if we could demonstrate value to the citizens of Creswell would be in the area of Emergency Operations Center. Manager Humble has been very successful in obtaining grants, and I would say much throughout this whole process, very successful in obtaining all manner of grants to basically minimize the amount of city funds that need to be put into the airport infrastructure. But in the area of the Emergency Operations Center, we now have some generators, diesel-powered generators in several critical areas of the airport. So the airport can exist on its own power, separated from the grid. And we have an EOC hangar now. We actually have a facility where we can put our operations equipment, emergency operations equipment, and various supplies, including things like MREs, dried meals, cots, different things that in the event of a disaster, we have a facility there and a facility with power. In other things that we've done, community events, we of course, we're very happy to have plane rides. The pilots are happy to give plane rides around the holidays, Veterans Day, well, not so much Veterans Day, but certainly the 4th of July. They always look forward to that. We've had student tours of the facilities there, and so all those things have been happening, and we're looking to kind of continue those things over the next couple of years so that we can kind of establish a track record and more of a institutionalize some of these initiatives. So, one of the things that would be helpful, I think, as we proceed with the strategic plan is, we're now getting to the point where, we've kind of shined up the asset. It's looking good. Kind of where do we go from here? I know in the last process that we had, the question that comes up in a lot of these strategic plans for airports is, to what extent is there an economic development initiative? In other words, can the airport investment be leveraged somehow to bring financial benefits to the citizens of Crestville? And that's when we kind of sidestepped that in the last strategic plan. That's one area that, typically when we have a public session at the airport, it's usually airport users. We don't get much in the way of input from the community at large here in Crestville. And so that's one of the areas that, as city councilors, and Alonzo's been great in liaison with us, but if we had some kind of a bit of direction on what you all would like to see or what you think your constituents would like to see in terms of, utilizing the airport to, leverage economic development in the form of, additional aviation businesses or manufacturing concern, or whether we should avoid doing that. That would all be very helpful to us in, recommending to you a strategic plan. One of the things, regardless of what is done in that regard, one of the things that's absolutely a prerequisite, and we're very happy to hear that there's progress being made, is the whole issue of water and wastewater service to the airport. We understand that even though that's not part of the airport enterprise fund, that activity is well underway to provide water and wastewater services to the airport. And pretty much we see that as being a prerequisite for future development of the airport. Some of the things that we see in the next year or two is hangar design and development. That's one of the areas, just from the standpoint of airport users. There's a large gap between what is available in terms of hangars and what the demand for hangars is. That's becoming even more pronounced now that, you see the city of Eugene in its airport is getting more kind of restrictive in terms of access, restrictive in many different ways, and more expensive for airport users. So there is, I believe, a growing need and demonstrated need for additional hangar facilities at the airport. One of the things, from a timing standpoint, we're finding a little bit of an anomaly or something that we're going to need to deal with is right in the middle of this upcoming 5-year period, we have a major planning effort that's required by the FAA, and the FAA requires a master plan update of the airport area and facilities. Included in such a scope would be, an issue that we've had in the past is, well, what do we do in terms of a airport office? You get what's called an FBO, which is the building that you see over there now, which houses a lot of the services for pilots. It's generally recognized that the building is pretty old, needs to be replaced, but how do we do that? Where do we do that? These are all kind of subjects of this is just an example of the subject of an item in the master plan. And so the master plan, being an FAA process, has lots of requirements for its content. It has requirements for public process and public outreach. And so, those will occur kind of like we're thinking in the 23-24 timeframe, which is kind of right in the middle of our thought. So in terms of a strategic plan, I mean, we could foresee getting to the master planning process and then kind of a redo of our strategic plan after the master planning process. So that's just kind of a heads up on that. initiatives that we see coming up in the area of Emergency Operations Center is communications infrastructure. Shelley has put out some grant requests for things like radio station, satellite phones. It's generally assumed that in a major disaster event that we will lose our cell phone service, we may lose our internet. Communications will be done via satellite phone, ham radio operators, and things of that nature. So now that we have a home for those things, an actual place that those can occur, we're well on the way of getting grants again to equip the Emergency Operations Center with communication equipment. We also need to drill and exercise our methods and procedures. We have all these nice facilities, we have equipment, but where the rubber really meets the road is, well, when the event happens, what do you do? We have emergency operations plan for the city. We have facilities both on this side of the highway, on the other side. How do we actually, what are our thoughts around actually activating and carrying out operations in an actual disaster? And that involves extending our regional relationships and partnerships. Shelley has done a good job in doing that. STEM program, we just need to maintain some momentum. Hopefully we won't have another stick in the road or stick in the machine or fly in the ointment, whatever you call it, in terms of disruption of our effort there. And I think we've got some pretty good traction there. So as I mentioned, so far in terms of the strategic plan, we've held one public input process. We hope to have one more. As I mentioned, we get few attendees, primarily airport users. And I think that pretty much covers, we can, as part of those processes, brainstorm. So we've got some ideas. I'll let some of the other commissioners talk about those as they come up. See if any of those catch your fancy. And they range from all manner of things, extending the airport runway, and doing lots of pretty exciting things over there. So those are my comments, and I'd with your permission, Mayor, if other commissioners would like to come and speak to some of those ideas, I think that would be helpful.
Well, let's see. First of all, council members have any questions for you? How's that? Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions for Jim? Shelley does.
I was gonna say, Shelley.
That's Shelley. There's something.
Which Shelley?
Shelley Clark. Shelley Clark.
Okay, Shelley Clark. Thank you for all that information. I'm wondering if you could speak to just the general process that you had for master planning. So, how did you arrive at the document that's in our packet?
Well, there are a couple of processes. So there's the master plan, which is pretty much an FAA kind of stipulated, regulated process. Then our city strategic plan. And so, quite frankly, we had a rather extensive public process back in 2017-18 timeframe, which expressed a vision statement. It's still, in many ways, we're still operating off of that same vision with our certainly that went into the last strategic plan, and that still guides us in our next strategic plan. It's time to maybe at some point, I think through the master planning process, we could refresh that vision and kind of take a further look out. To be honest, I think we're still reaping the benefits of the last process that we had, and we're still implementing off of that process at this point.
Other councilors?
What is your target date for wrapping up your planning?
We're looking at next spring. We have a meeting, an airport commission meeting in January and another one in April. We certainly hope to have something to you that's actionable by in the April-May timeframe next year.
That was really kind of what I was wanting to get at, just to clarify. So the master plan, which is driven by the FAA, is what you're saying, And that's going to fall, you're projecting sometime in 2023 to 2024.
Yes.
So that the document you're working on, it seems like it doesn't make sense to completely wrap this up if it's going to take a whole lot of your time and energy, if we think it's going to be disrupted by the FAA's requirement for a new master plan. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, the efficient use of time and energy would probably have us doing kind of an abbreviated process to get us over to the next few years, to the end of the master planning process. And then, like I say, put a lot of energy then into reconfirming the vision for the airport, really reviewing the results of that master planning process. And I think that could take us from, say, 24 to 30 or 29, something like that. So it would be, you got a 4-year process we just had, maybe another 2 or 3 year kind of outlook, and then, a major undertaking planning process along with the FAA process.
So maybe the visioning strategic plan that you hope to have done by April maybe would be a shorter time frame, maybe 2023 to 2025.
Right, and with a lot of ideas. I mean, we'll
like
have a
that.
lot of ideas that will provide input into the master planning process, I'm sure.
Okay, that's kind of my thinking, just trying to figure out how that all fits together. And in terms of process and public input, that is always a huge challenge for the council. So this year, we undertook a 5-year strategic plan for the city, because it was time. And we brought in a consultant, which we did before, and they spent a lot of time and effort to get input from the citizens, and my guess is they would say they didn't get as much as they wish they would have.
You never get as much as you wish you would have.
Never get as much. So, that's hard.
It is.
But maybe, yeah, maybe you do the best you can now for a plan next year, and then when it comes time that the master plan's done, and we're saying, okay, let's do more of a comprehensive view, maybe at that time we reconsider how do we do that, or even bringing in a consultant to help us do that. So, okay, any other questions for Jim? Okay, do we have other members of the commission that would like to come and speak on this whole process?
Just the strategic plan. So for me, when we got together and started talking about the strategic.
Tell us
plan,
your name.
Kyle Bushman.
Okay, Kyle?
When we got together and started talking about the strategic plan, we were kind of like, what's the purpose? And just to separate the two, the FAA master plan and the strategic plan, when we were in the meetings, we kind of talked, and it seemed like that the strategic plan was the city and the airport. What's the direction that the city would like to go with the airport? What's the overall trends in the next 5 years? Are there certain things that the city has plans for, that kind of thing? So it's like almost a company meeting in-house. Like, what are we thinking? The FAA master plan, my thought, or what we kind of talked about with that is, that has to do with grant assurance and big picture stuff for the airport, so we make sure we stay in compliance for that kind of thing. And so when we were at the meetings with the strategic plan, it seemed like it was a good opportunity for the airport commission to talk to the city and kind of see, what do you think about these ideas? Does that in line with the vision you guys have? And then what do you guys vision the airport, and kind of bridge a gap there? The master plan versus strategic plan was kind of how we talked about it. And then with the airport commission, it's an opportunity for you guys to hear what's going on at the airport, ask questions, but also to talk back and forth openly about what are your thoughts, how did things go, where do we want to be, that kind of thing. So I think dividing those two up as the master plan, strategic plan, I think is better than to think of them as the same thing.
That's a very good delineation for us, I think. Very helpful.
And then we talked about that, and then this is an opportunity, maybe there's another time or something like that, but we essentially put these items together and make a wish list, or we did it, or it was done before for 2018 to 2022 or 23, whatever the time frame was. And on that list, there was a huge amount of accomplishments that were done these people sat down and made a list, and they've achieved a lot of great things. And so we look back, okay, moving forward, it's a strategic plan, it's not a requirement, it's just like, this is what we think potentially could happen. So you're not gonna get all the items on the list, but essentially getting all of our brains in the same direction, so that way as a city, everyone's looking the same way.
You know, what might be really helpful is next year, Jim, are you the chair of the committee, Jim?
At the moment, yes.
Okay. Maybe next year, as you're continuing to work on it in the springtime, maybe that's a good time to have a joint meeting of the Airport Commission and the City Council specifically to talk about what we'd like to see happen out there.
And there's pros and cons, like each item, there's pros and cons. And so like you could say lengthening the runway. Well, if we're trying to attract bigger airplanes, bigger businesses, lengthening the runway would be an attractive thing to those people. But if we're trying to keep Creswell a smaller airport and GA access focused, lengthening, or whatever the idea is, I mean, how do we, what's our push, obviously? You want to include all aspects of aviation, obviously. But like, we could kind of go back and there's pros and cons to every decision we make.
Yeah, so, I don't know, that's just a thought. Because I like what you said, that the airport, it's owned by the city. We want it to benefit all the airport users. We also want it to benefit the city. And so it's a good idea to get our heads together and say, okay, how do we see, Michelle, what are you thinking?
Could we not do it in the spring, because that's when we're doing budgeting? Maybe we can do it in the fall?
Next fall? Well, but you're saying, Jim, that you think you're gonna have something ready for us by springtime.
I could see us having something preliminary, you know, subject to whatever processes and additional revisions, you know, just in terms of the back and forth between the commission and the council, I could see that taking some period of months. You know, we'd want to fit in with the city's calendar and, you know, your staff's requirements and their schedules as well, so.
Maybe summer?
What about like an April update on where you're at in your strategic planning process? And then the council can decide, would we like to do a brainstorming thing in the summer or in September? What do you think, Michelle?
That's really close to budgeting. We start our budgeting the beginning of May, and you'll have a work session at the end of April. And so that really starts piling things up on city council. But if you want to have long city council meetings,
Oh, I love them.
then
Well, what I was suggesting was that it would be part of a work session, and then it would be an update, kind of like what we've got tonight,
Okay.
on where they're at.
Okay, but you know, springtime is, you're wanting to do training on homelessness, you're gonna be overwhelmed.
A lot of stuff.
The thing I saw with the strategic plan, like the major benefit that was glaringly obvious is like, the airport's kind of a separate entity, and it's hard for people to kind of wrap their mind around certain operations, how it benefits and that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to see that the airport commission and the city themselves, how do we have, we talked about like doing drills, for instance. Well, I'm 29 years old, and meetings like this, people talking, I've never been a part of it, and it's awesome that it happens, but I don't think the majority of the people don't realize that we're talking about emergency response stuff at Creswell that everyone in the town is going to benefit from. And so how do we, like public outreach, how do we show the things that are happening at the Creswell Airport in a positive light, but then also show them the value? Because there is value in everything that's happening at the airport and the upgrades and all this stuff. And so, but also with the city, we want the airport to go in the direction that the city ultimately wants it to go. Because it's owned by the city. And so I think that was where essentially lining the business model, I'm a small business owner, and so what's the business model that the city would like to go with the airport? Is like, here's the direction. And a strategic plan not being binding, it's just here's a list of items that we wish we could get done. We looked at it and said, okay, the airport commission likes this awesome list. The city looks at it and we go, yeah, it falls in line with what we want for the airport. And that essentially helps get the ball rolling, so that way it's not all these random new ideas. It's like, here was big picture of what we wanted, that kind of thing. That's what I saw with the strategic plan. Outside of the master plan. The master plan is FAA grant assurance stuff, but the strategic plan I saw value in that sense.
And we have in our strategic plan that we're going to do tabletop exercises and things like that. I mean, that's incorporated in, but I don't think we'll be doing them before fall.
Next year.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to see if there's other airport commission members who would like to speak to us. Like Mike Anderson back there. Got anything on your plate?
Well, I guess I could give you a little history about what's going on at the schools, because I don't think most of you have any idea.
Are you involved with schools, Mike?
I've been on the school board now for 8 years.
Okay, good. Member of the school board.
Several years ago, before COVID and all that, the superintendent and the rest of us were trying to figure out how do you get kids' interest, how do you get them out of school, and maybe they don't necessarily want to go to college, but what's out there for them? How do you perk their interest? And we're sitting there and some kids are going by like this with their phone, and we got to thinking, hey, let's get a drone program in. So we hired a teacher, trained her, and of course COVID, and then her husband got a job, moved out of town, so that was the end of that. But we took a bunch of kids we took the 8th grade class from the middle school over to the high school, bought them lunch, and over to the airport. And Shelley had it set up for us. They talked to pilots, they talked to mechanics, five or six different aspects of the airport. And those kids were really excited when they got back to school. And so we kind of fast forward a little bit, and I got a call from the principal at the high school here a while back, and she's actually hired a shop teacher that's going to teach airplane maintenance at the school. That's he's certified to teach, or to, I never can remember the initials, but anyways, a certified maintenance guy for airplanes. He's going to start his program in November. And always before the pilots, whenever we were talking about this, they were all really excited about it. They wanted us to help they wanted to help us any way they could with, working with the kids, giving them free flights, it was just fantastic. And I'm really hoping this sticks, because I've taken the instructor now, I've taken him to the airport, tried to introduce him to everybody, and we've still got some people to introduce him to, but he's excited about being here. It's his first teaching assignment, and the goal is, or at least mine, I can't speak for the whole board, but I want to get a program going where when graduation day comes along, I can hand out a diploma and a pilot's license, or maybe a certificate to fix planes, whatever. But I just think it's really cool, and I think at one time the city bought the school a hangar at the airport, and I think it's being used now. I think Kyle's got it. And that's just fantastic. I mean, I think we'll all end up working, at the end of the day, working together on this. And what we get enough people in, we can open it up to Southern Lane County, and that's more kids coming into school for us, so it's more money for the school so we can operate. Sisters has a program. When they started, they had 4 kids, and the last time I was over there, they had 26, and for graduation day, they all flew to, I think it was Burns, Oregon, had lunch, and flew home. And that's just way cool for those kids. But like I say, originally started out, how we get those kids' interest, keep them in school and want to be there, and that's what we came up with. And city has been great to work with on. The pilots have been fantastic, offered to help. So we'll see where all this goes, but I'm really excited about it now. I think it's going to turn into something. If we don't get another COVID run, or I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at. We're just in the infant stage, and so far, everybody we've talked to has been really excited about it, and they want to help out every way they can. So we'll get it going.
All right. Thank you very much, and thanks for your leadership on this for a number of years, Mike.
We've been trying.
Yep. Any other members of the Airport Commission like to address the council tonight? Okay, so, council, so we're not being asked tonight to approve this document. It's still a work in progress. So there was a couple of things I wanted to comment on it. It referred to city administrator throughout, so we need to change that. Right, Shelley?
Yes, sir.
To city manager. Then it refers to the Hyman classroom, and I believe Hyman is spelled with 2 N's at the end. So you can check on that.
And I don't know that that was ever formally adopted. That was just what was put in during the visioning.
Okay, okay. Then at one point it refers to on page 3 in red, work with M. Anderson. And I would just like that spelled out rather than abbreviated in a document. But it's good, Jim, to hear you report that this is a work in progress still. So it sounds like, Michelle, maybe the next time we meet, you and I and Kevin, we need to kind of project towards next year and figure out when would be a good time to bring it back to the council.
Yeah.
Because we definitely want to have you come back. I like the idea of having, it's wonderful that you come in mass tonight to speak to us. Kevin, thank you so much Kyle, for speaking to us. And Alonzo, you do a tremendous job as our liaison at the airport.
I'm trying.
You do a great job. So, council, any other comments? Okay. Michelle, anything more that we need to do on this right now?
No.
So Jim, we'll get back to you. Michelle, can you just make a note that we're going to put this on our next agenda, and then we'll get back to Jim and let you know when we want to bring you back to hear some more. Because it is a very good point you both make, that we need to figure out how this works in with the city's processes as well. So, okay. Well, then we move on to C, which is adjournment. How's that sound? We are adjourned.
This is
I'd like the answer is the next year.
sounds like it, yeah.
Yes, and I gave Grace 2 copies.
Okay.
I thought they went around everybody. I think
I fell down in terms of like passing it around.
because I did give Grace
I want to make sure everybody's got a copy.
from Jim. We need to break all the tables.
Oh, yeah, this one.
We need to break all the tables down and move them back.
Okay, I guess they're just extras. I guess they're just
We need
extras.
to break the table down and move them right.